In a Time of Mass Migration by Brian Chikwava. In 1990, just before a World Cup football match between Italy and Argentina, Diego Maradona urged Neapolitans to support Argentina because you shouldn't forget that in Italy they do not consider you to be Italian. The country comes and asks for your support for just one day of the year, and for the other 364, they'll call you Africans. It was an amusing moment. In his way, Maradona had put his finger on a particular skin color hierarchy that is in evident operation as one moves from North Africa and up northward through Western Europe. There are several times more Africans in Italy than other Mediterranean countries than there were in 1990. More often than not, the aim is to get to countries that are further north. In recent years, we've witnessed Africans arriving here in the UK through the most desperate routes, sometimes falling out of the skies onto properties around Heathrow Airport. Often, the position that these arrivals occupy in the global socio-economic matrix is not unlike that of ordinary people in an average de-industrialized town or city in the Midlands. But this invokes a whole constellation of comparisons well outside the Overton window of politically acceptable discussion in the general population. Power has the capacity to shape the moment, so to make certain possible connections invisible. When the flag is invoked, people can rally into predictable groupings, and the migrant emerges as the figure to which every problem can be traced. Power prefers vertical relationships and abhors horizontal ones. Using the spectre of the migrant to stoke fears in people is a winning political maneuver, which is perhaps not surprising. After all, the constellation of obstacles that the migrant figure faces are not new. The past holds a long and miserable record of these moments of rejection. Decolonization in Africa, for example, gathered irreversible speed once the colonized started to question their rulers' fidelity to the humanist and Enlightenment values that were held up as the pinnacle of progress in human thought. Humanism, in its progressive ways, wanted Africans to be universal like Europeans, but racist practices kept denying Africans their place as members of the human family. The migrant faces identical hurdles. The migrant story, which largely speaks to what is wrong with the world we already have, is used to make us feel afraid of the possibility of changing the world. The world of the 21st century is a towering and baroque construction. At every corner, it has been shaped by the desire of one social group or another, or one gender within that group, to control in ways simultaneously delicate and savage the other, rather than embrace their own freedom. But a world created by such partial impulses can only be maintained by even more acts of violence on the other, and sometimes on the self. Unsurprisingly, we get surprised at one inevitable tragedy after another and have to ask ourselves, is this who we really are? Is this what we have become? Often we do not want to see. Sometimes the situation is shaped in a way that makes it a struggle to understand ourselves outside notions of power, control, domination, blame, innocence, or helplessness. What is more, the more certain we are that we do understand, the more likely we are to leave no doubt in our minds that we do not, in fact, understand. Sometimes it is the regimes that we live in that make it impossible to embrace the exuberance of freedom. Sometimes it is their material comfort. To those who have, the possibility of change is always a threat. Freedom is an anxiety-inducing notion wherever it is selectively embraced. In the past, it may have been the battle cry of the African nationalists who spearheaded independence efforts on the continent. Today, freedom is the cry of right-wing nationalists in North America, continental Europe, and in the UK. But if one wants freedom for oneself, the only consistent and coherent position to take is to want freedom for others. If while flying across any continent, you gaze down and see the world as it has always been, you do not see borders between countries unless they happen to be rivers or mountains. When fish cross an imaginary line around our isles, they become our fish. When human beings do the same, they become migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, confined to camps, waiting to be vetted and informed whether they deserve to join our society. Most refugees do not make it past these bureaucratic tests. Almost all would have had to cross several borders and the Mediterranean Sea before they ended up in a camp or detention center. They arrive with high hopes that in Western Europe, enlightened Europe, they will finally be able to claim their human freedom. They almost always discover that their human rights are not there to be claimed. The migrant understands, sometimes consciously, that the world is organized in categories that are largely the legacy of the wealthier nations' grand projects. The migrant knows that the wealthy possess the world in ways their poor cousins never can. The migrant feels that she is a squatter in a world she does not own. The migrant knows how to follow a trail, even without knowing that traders of agricultural commodities sitting in London or New York can starve people in Africa and make themselves immensely wealthy overnight by speculating on grain commodities grown in sub-Saharan Africa, buying up almost everything and later selling at a price that puts food way beyond the reach of the average African. The way of the world is that ugliness must manifest itself in some corners of the earth in order for beauty, luxury, and wealth to manifest themselves in emporiums elsewhere. Dear listener, I promise you'll be rewarded for your forbearance. I am unable to promise the exact magnitude of the reward since, as you surely know, literature has a tendency to reward in proportion to what you yourself bring to it. Without your ear, all this writing business is meaningless. What follows are the reflections of other writers on our world in a time of mass migration. In Portrait of a Life, Amal Saeed traces the story of her family through a relationship photo essay that takes us to Kenya, Denmark, and the UK. For Inhumans, Henrietta Rose Innes turns her eye to the historical exchange of flora and fauna between the UK and the Cape region of South Africa. An extract from Delia Jarrett Macaulay's memoir in progress, Rokeldees, gives us a glimpse into her upbringing in a Sierra Leonean family in Leicester, while in What Enid Blyton Did to Me, Billy Kahora meditates on finding his bearings, having left Nairobi to settle in Bristol. Chika Onigwe's flash fiction, Odili, invites you into a precarious existence of a Nigerian man who works as a security guard at a supermarket in London. And Olumide Popula reimagines a Calais migrant's lament in You Can't Breathe Water.